Ecclesiastes is one of those mid-range books after Psalms and Proverbs, and sometimes gets lost in the shuffle. A wonderful book written by possibly the wisest man ever to live, Solomon. Some have said, well, Jesus is the most wise man ever to live. Yeah, but Jesus, in the New Testament era, the Holy Spirit abiding in him and through him. Solomon, I don't know, he's in the top three for sure, if not number one or number two. He's got to be number three. One of the wisest men ever to walk the face of the earth. If you recall, God said, I'll bless you with anything, and he asked for wisdom. And then he wrote this book, Ecclesiastes. And if you've ever read it, how many of you have sat and read the book before? You kind of have an idea what it's about, right? What is it all about? It's all about vanity and emptiness, and nothing matters. And I thought if I could obtain this or have that, then I would be fulfilled. But I have it, and I'm not fulfilled. And it's really sort of a depressing book as you read through it. There's nothing new under the sun. Whatever you think of to do, someone's already done it, and they've already found out that it's not worth doing, that there's nothing you can do that's going to bring fulfillment. But if you read the book carefully, and I would challenge you later, even later this afternoon, read it from start to finish. Read it all in one sitting and make a little note every time he says something does have value. There are, I counted 6. Now there's either 7 or 8 or 9, but you can lump some of them together. There's about 6 things in the book that do have value. So we're going to talk about the 6 things that really matter. Now we don't have the notes up for you this morning. If you really would like to, afterwards I don't mind photocopying what I have here so you have the references and things like that. But what really does matter? Ecclesiastes, written by Solomon, wisest man possibly ever to live. He had all the fame anyone could ever ask for, all of the wealth and the success a man could ever want. He was the king of Israel after his father David, who was maybe the greatest king Israel had ever seen. And Solomon took the nation at a great time, and Israel had most of its prosperity, more prosperity in that time of Solomon's reign, possibly than ever before or ever since. And even though he was the wealthiest man, and he had everything he could ever ask for, anything he could desire, anything he wanted to accomplish, he did it. And then at the end of it all, he still asked himself, so much of this is vain. What really matters in life? And so we're asking ourselves that here this morning, and I think it'll be profitable for us to study in that manner here today. But I was at the barber getting my hair cut. I was waiting, and it took a little longer than usual because there was a gentleman around the corner getting his hair cut. I couldn't see him, but I could hear him, and he was just complaining over and over again. And he was, oh, it doesn't look straight, and oh, you did that crooked, and look at that hairline. It's terrible. You need to fix that, and I see hairs out of place here. And he was just being real picky, and the lady at the register kind of came over to me and she said, this guy comes in every week and he takes about 90 minutes every week. And when he comes in, no one really wants to take him to their chair because he's so picky and he's barking orders and complaining. And I'm sitting there, and eventually I kind of leaned in my seat to look around the corner to see the man. And the man was almost completely bald. He had almost no hair to begin with. He had some around the sides. There's nothing wrong with that. But it was so ironic. He was so picky, spending over an hour every week nitpicking about every hair. And no matter what this man did to his hair or what the barber did to his hair, he was not going to walk outside that door and everyone go, wow, what a haircut. It didn't matter what he did. It should have been a 7-minute, just keep it nice, keep it clean, keep it sharp. But he wanted every little thing. And eventually the lady said to him, sir, I can't do anything about your hairline. There's nothing I can do. And he about lost it. It was crazy. And he comes in every week. And I say, why does he keep coming here if it's so frustrating for him? And they said, I don't know, but he comes all the time. What is he doing? I mean, all the effort, all the time spent, and it really wouldn't make that much of a difference. And we want to ask ourselves, are there things we're doing in our life, frustration spent, effort spent, and we're working on this, or we're frustrated with that, and we're toiling with all these different things, and then in the end, we walk out the door, and it doesn't really matter anyway, right? What really matters in life? Over these 12 fairly depressing chapters, we're going to look at 6. The first one we're going to find in over a few verses, chapter 2, verse 24. If you're jotting them down or you'd like to write them down for later, we see the same one occur in chapter 2, verse 24, chapter 3, verse 22, chapter 5, verse 18, and then we see it again in chapter 9, verse 10. I'll repeat those as we go for those of you taking notes. But we see in chapter 2, verse 24, Solomon, amidst all of the emptiness and the vanity, he says, "Nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God." What is he saying here? There is value and fulfillment in working hard. In whatever you find to do, we'll look in a moment, do it with all your heart, that there is a sense of fulfillment and a sense of value when someone works hard at something. It's two parts. You have to work hard at something, but then also enjoy the fruit of your labor. Whatever it is you've labored for, whatever it is you've earned from your work, to make sure you enjoy it. We don't want to work so hard and so much we become what our society calls a workaholic, and you never actually enjoy it with your friends or enjoy it with your family. It's a two-part point there, that we need to work hard and enjoy it. The word work in the Hebrew is amal. It means to toil and to severely work, to sweat. Do you realize that God designed man for work? What did he do? He created Adam. He breathed into Adam the breath of life, made Adam a living being, a living soul, the breath of God inside him, the Spirit of God inside Adam. And even before the fall of man, before there was any sin introduced into the universe, he said, here's your job, take care of the garden. He gave Adam work. There's something of value to working as hard as we can, but also to enjoying that work. And as a person, we will feel some sense of emptiness if we don't have something to work on, if we're not working on something, whether it be in the ministry or whether it be out in society, or it's something we can do from home, something that we're working on, something that we're working towards. We're geared that way. We're designed that way. And I would challenge you today to find something in society that you enjoy working on and contributing to, and also find something for the church or something for the kingdom of God that you can be working on as well, and have the best of both worlds. But to find that place to work in God's kingdom and find that place in society is very important. Now, we're talking about 6 things that matter today. Now, at the end of 5 of them, I would encourage you strongly, don't say, you know what, we got 5 out of 6, let's go get an early brunch, because all 5 of the first 5 all hinge on the 6th one. Solomon was clever that way. He ended it on a high note, and the first 5 don't mean anything without number 6. So there's no skipping out early, like grabbing the purse and kind of the ducking and tippy-toeing, But you can if you really need to be somewhere. We won't pick on you. I'm just joking. But the 6th one is the most important one. The first one, though, to work hard and enjoy what you earn. And he says in chapter 2, verse 24, this also is from the hand of God. It is by God's design. It is by his hand. It is good in the eyes of God that we find work and we work towards it. He says in chapter 3, verse 22, if you'd like to turn the page there, chapter 3, verse 22, he adds to that thought. He said, so I perceived that nothing is better than a man should rejoice in his own works, for that is his heritage. For who can bring him to see what happens after him? He says that is his heritage, that is his legacy. A man's work will often live longer than the man himself. Many times we can establish something, we can start something or build something that will last longer than we last in our own lifetime. And he said this is man's heritage, this is what he is called to do. A man's work can even bear fruit long after he is gone. Think of all the people that have started things and they've passed on, and yet that work is still working in society or still working for the kingdom of God. I think of the Refuge Pregnancy Center. I hope that long after we're gone, the fruit of that labor and the effects of that work in the hearts and lives of those young ladies and their children and their grandchildren will live on. And that's such an important part of our lives, to work and build a legacy, no matter what it is your hand finds to do. It could be driving a garbage truck. It could be working on, in a Best Buy or something like that. But whatever your hand finds to do, do it. Your work is a calling and a gift from God. We see that in chapter 5, verse 18. If you want to turn there, chapter 5, verse 18, Solomon says, here's what I've seen. It is good and fitting for one to eat and to drink and to enjoy all of the good of his labor which he toils under the sun, all of the days which God gives him for his life. This is his heritage. So we see it again over and over again, this sense that God has given this, that this is from the hand of God, that we have a calling and a gift from God, and we need to put that gift to work. And then I love chapter 9, verse 10, if you want to turn. Chapter 9, verse 10 says this, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. I'll read that again. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all of your might. For there is no work, there is no device, there is no knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are going. So he kind of starts turning back to the pessimist that we're all going to die. But what is his point? Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all of your strength, because it's not as if you can save that strength for the next life. You can't store up your wisdom and take it with you when you die. You can't store up all of the knowledge that you've gained and accumulated and then take it with you into the next life. Or if you rest a lot and you put your feet up a lot and you're not doing much, you can't take all that energy and all that gift that God has given you, you can't take that into the next life. So he says, whatever you find to do, do it with all of your heart, do it with all of your might. You cannot save your strength or your knowledge for the grave. There's nothing you can take with you, so use it while you have it. So we see the first one, to work hard, but also to enjoy what God has given you. That word enjoy, the Hebrew word means to experience or to enjoy. And the purpose of our work is not just to work, right? That's one part. That's part one. But the purpose of your work really is to enrich the fruit and the enjoyment of the work. When you work hard for something, you're going to enjoy it a lot more. Maybe some of you had your first car given to you. I would bet that you didn't take as good a care of that car as someone who worked and sweat and saved every dollar and then bought their own, right? When you buy something, when you work for something, it has more value. Does that make sense? That it's a part of that work. We work, but then we enjoy it. And the work is to help us enjoy it. I remember after I finished my first marathon and my legs were shredded and I was tired and you'd been running for hours and sweating and you're dehydrated, and I crossed that finish line. And I didn't like the soda called Red Bull. I didn't like it. It was gross. I didn't like the taste. But at the finish line, they're very clever this way. They had a Red Bull representative handing them out of a cold cooler. And I said, do you have anything else? I was parched. I was thirsty. I was dehydrated. I would take anything. And I said, I don't like this. Do you have water? Do you have anything else? He said, nope, this is all I have. So I took it, and I drank it. It was ice cold, and it was the sweetest thing I'd ever tasted. I didn't care for it before. That was 7 or 8 years ago, and now every time I go to a gas station, I'm compelled to go get one because of that one moment in time where I had worked so hard, and then they handed me a cold drink, and a cold drink had never tasted so good. Why is that? Because our work should enhance our fulfillment. Our work should help us to enjoy the things that we earn even more. So we see the first point, to work hard and to enjoy what you earn. Solomon says a number of times in this book, that has value, that there is a sense of fulfillment in that. Now remember, they all hinge on number 6. But here, let's take a look at number 2. Chapter 3, verses 1 through 10. But we'll go ahead and read verse 10 and 11 together first. He says this, I have seen the God-given task which the sons of men are to be occupied. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into their hearts, except that none can find out the work that God is doing from the beginning to the end. So first of all, to work hard and enjoy it. Second thing that has value in life is to live everything in God's timing. He says everything is beautiful when it's lived according to God's timing. And we teach this to the young folks in the youth group. Especially a lot of them formulating their life, and they're starting to get involved in the guys and the girls and the dating, when they're in high school and they want to, pursue that. But we remind them, Adam had his walk with God first. Then he had what he was going to do with his life next. He knew he was going to tend the garden. He had his, quote-unquote career path. And then God brought him Eve and introduced him to Eve. And there is an order to these things. There's an order to life. And when we live according to God's timing and God's order, it's beautiful. My daughter Jasmine is 6, but when she was 2, and my daughter Brooklyn is 2. So have you seen her running around? It's that age where they can't really talk, and mom and dad can sort of understand them, but most other people can't. And they run around and find things that they can smack their head on. Anything that's around, they're going to hit their head on it at some point. And Jazzy was 2, and Shekinah was 4, and we went to Walmart, and we were looking at the fish, and they have all the fish tanks. And I took my eye off of Jazz for a moment because they were scooping the fish out. And we all know how exciting that is, right? When they're scooping the fish out to some kid's going to buy it, and they're putting it in the bag. And Jazzy started fiddling with a little knob right under where the tanks were. And then the knob kind of fell open and clunk. and all this stuff started, the fish food and different things, pieces of plastic and different tools they use for the fish were falling. And you know that fish food that's like translucent and it's like pink and green and all that, and it kind of splattered out all over the floor. They had a bag in there and it made a huge mess, and like little things were clunking around, quite a bit of noise, and everyone looked at Jazz, this little 2-year-old girl. She looked like Cindy Lou Who from Dr. Seuss, this little one. And she just looks up at everyone with her big brown eyes and says, "I'm only 2. I'm not 4. I'm only 2. It's exactly how she said it. And no one could be upset at the kid. Because at her age and her time in life, you're not expected to be all responsible and all. You're expected to be a kid. And I'm fortunate that in my life, when I was a kid, I was allowed to be a kid. And when I was a student, I was able to be a student. And then when I was a young adult, I was able to be a young adult. And that life had an order because my parents understood that life has an order, and they tried to keep me within that order. And life has been beautiful. And it's true that when we live life according to God's time, God has made everything beautiful in its time. He has set that order to life, that those parameters, that if we live within God's parameters, life can be so amazing and so beautiful. There is a time that is appropriate for many different experiences in life, many different actions to take. Let's take a look at that list that Solomon laid out for us and ask yourself as you're reading this, what is appropriate in my time right here and now? How should I be living? What is God calling me to do? How is God calling me to live in this phase of my life? Chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. He says, "There is a time and a season for everything, a time for every purpose under heaven. There's a time to be born and a time to die. There's a time to plant and a time to pluck what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. There is a time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and to dance. There is a time to throw away stones and a time to gather those stones together. There's a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to gain. There is a time to lose. There is time to keep and time to throw away. There's a time to tear and a time to sow. A time for silence and a time to speak. There's a time to love and a time to hate. A time of war and a time of peace." Solomon is saying there's a time for everything. There's a correct time for all these different feelings, all these different emotions, different actions to take. And life is beautiful when it's lived in its right timing. There's nothing more beautiful than seeing a little baby with a mother and a father who love that child and see the kid grow, and the kid gets to be a kid. And then the kid goes to school and gets to learn and grow. And then you see this, even in death, it can be beautiful when it's a man or woman who's lived a full life and walked with the Lord, and they peacefully give up that last breath, and their soul goes to be with Jesus in heaven. I mean, everything is so beautiful when it's done according to God's time and God's plan. But we know a lot of times that isn't the case. And life can be rough and life can be turbulent. I've learned in my years here at the church, whether I was working with families or adults or kids or the whole group together, that a lot of the dysfunctions and the struggles and the hardships, especially among families, can usually be traced back to doing things out of God's order, right? Having kids outside of wedlock and things like that. Why did God do that? He says, because if you do it this way, it is so beautiful. It is so rich, and it will lead you to a deeper relationship with me. And most of the problems that I've faced in families and people wanting to come and talk to me about their family and their needs, a lot of it comes from wanting things in the wrong time and wanting things in the wrong order. But here we see Solomon says everything is beautiful when it's done in the right time, in God's timing. He also said, and I don't know if you caught it, but he said God has put eternity in their hearts. There's something eternal about us, that he created Adam and he breathed his breath into him, that every single one of us has a sense of eternity. Every single human being has this sense of something more. You don't see animals like deer and bears and dogs lifting their hands and worshiping God or trying to find a higher power or knowing that there's something greater out there. They're not geared that way because eternity is not placed in their hearts. Eternity is placed in our hearts. There's something eternal about us. His breath and then his death on that cross that purchased us back as Adam fell in rebellion to God. And then each one of us has stumbled and fallen in our walk with God, and we've rebelled from the Lord. But Jesus took the wrath of God. He took the punishment of God on that cross that we could live in eternity with God again. And if we have eternity in our hearts, if it's placed and interwoven in our soul, then how do we need to live in order to find fulfillment? Yes, we need to live with hard work and enjoying that hard work. Yes, we need to live everything in its timing. But we also need to be investing in something that's eternal. If we're not investing in that eternal nature, in that spirit that God has placed in us, we will feel a lack of fulfillment. We need to invest in prayer. We need to invest in the Scripture and in God's holy word, because those things are eternal and everlasting, and they never change. And those things have been put in our hearts. And if we don't satisfy that, if we don't invest in that, there will be a sense of emptiness in our lives. Investing in ministry and in ministering to others, to giving something eternal to those around us. If we only live for what is temporary, we will always struggle with finding fulfillment. No one knows what God is doing from the beginning to the end. Isn't that what he said? He said, God has placed eternity in our hearts, and nobody knows the beginning from the end. God has a plan. He has a purpose, but none of us can really decipher exactly where he's taking us in life. So what does that mean? That in order to live for eternity, what must we do? We must walk with him every day. Because it's going to be a windy road. We don't know exactly where he's going. No one knows the end from the beginning. No one knows exactly where God is taking you in your life. So it is crucial and critical that we spend time investing in what is eternal, and that every day we're spending that time walking with Jesus, letting him lead us and guide us, because no one knows the end from the beginning. And then he says in chapter 7, verse 14, kind of goes along with this thought of living in God's timing. I just want to add it in there. Chapter 7, verse 14. He says, in the day of prosperity, be joyful. But in the day of adversity or challenge, consider this. Surely God has appointed one just like he appointed the other. In the time of prosperity, be joyful. Be thankful. Live in that moment. Don't have a time where you should be joyful and you're saying, yeah, but it could all fall apart. Or you're the guy that always finds something wrong. He says, hey, when time is good, enjoy it. Be joyful. Don't look for something wrong. Don't be a downer. But also consider that when life gets tough and there's challenges, the same God who brought that joyful time is also a part of that adversity, that they both come from the same hand. So consider that when we're looking at God's timing. Galatians chapter 6, verse 9 says, do not grow weary in doing good. That's a challenge. Don't grow weary in doing good, because life can wear you down and things can tire you out. It can just wear you down. He says, but don't grow weary in doing good. In due season, you will reap if you do not give up. So don't give up. Genesis 18, verse 4, he says to Abraham, is anything too hard for God? At the appointed time, he will return to you. Talking about the promise of his son. It would take a lot longer than Abraham thought. It would be a lot more difficult than Abraham thought. But it was all in God's timing. So it's valuable and fulfilling in life to work hard and to enjoy it. Secondly, it's fulfilling and it's valuable to live all of our lives within the timing that God has laid out for us. Thirdly, chapter 4, verses 9 through 12. Chapter 4, verse 9 through 12. We'll read it together. This is the third thing. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Verse 11. Again, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him. And a threefold cord is not easily broken. What is he talking about here? I've been to weddings where they use that, say the two are together and the third is the Holy Spirit. That's good, and that's all good and well. But I think a lot of what he's talking about here is something as simple as good friendships. What has value in life? What adds fulfillment to your life? Working hard, enjoying your work. We saw living in God's timing. But also good, rich friendships, they can add value to life. Good friends, he says, they'll pick you up when you fall. If you're alone and you stumble and you fall, who's going to help you? Or you're cold and alone, who can help you? Good friends can pick you up when you fall. Good friends can bring comfort in your time of need. They can't always change the circumstances, can they? It could be a lonely night, it could be a cold night, could have a lot going on, but a good friend can keep you warm. They can't always change everything in the universe, but they can bring a sense of comfort. Good friends can stand stronger together than you could stand alone. That word accountability comes to mind. right? Especially with the young crowd, but with the adults as well. That when you're a lone ranger, it's a lot easier to slip and start falling in your walk with the Lord. But when you got a core group of friends, they're not going to let you stumble quite so easily. Good and healthy friendships can add a sense of fulfillment to your life. But remember this, that friendships require work, don't they? Anyone own a pickup truck? Anyone? And your friend needs to move, right? Friendship is often inconvenient. Friendship often, you're not always the guy down needing someone to pick you up. Sometimes you're the one that's got to cancel his day and go and help the one who's down, right? Friendship, you say, well, I want friends, or I don't have friends, or I just haven't been able to find the right friends. Well, maybe it's because you're looking for what you get out of it rather than what you need to put into it. A friendship requires a great deal of sacrifice, a great deal of investment, and friendship is often very inconvenient. Jesus said in John 15, verses 12 through 15, he says, love one another as I have loved you. For no greater love than this, that a man would lay down his life for his friends. Jesus says, here's the example of friendship. Love each other as I have loved you. What did I do? I carried you on my back everywhere I went. I washed your feet. I put myself as servant to you. I gave my life on a cross for you. That's the richest friendship we could ever have, is that friendship with Jesus. But let's take his example. Friendship is often inconvenient. Friendship can often be difficult, and it can cost you something. But having that friendship adds value to our lives. Let's take a look at number 4. Chapter 7, verse 11. I know what you're thinking. Yes, he's getting faster as he goes. They're getting shorter as they go. Number 4. Chapter 7, verse 11 says this. It's very simple. Wisdom with a good inheritance and profitable to those who see the sun. Basically, he's saying, be wise with what you've been given. To use what you've been given wisely. Chapter 7, verse 11, for those of you taking notes. But to be wise with whatever it is you have been given. It is vain to be wasteful, but to invest everything you have in whatever you see as fulfilling. I think, last week we took that offering for that young man, Xavier, going to Bible school. I think he's in the sound booth right now. That's a wise investment. You're taking what you've been giving and you're investing it in a preacher who's going to preach for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, going to be in ministry, going to be affecting other people's lives. That's a wise investment. You should feel good about that. But to invest whatever we have into things that matter, whether it's money or whether it's your time, whether it's your strength or your possessions. There's a friend of mine here in this church who's numerous times offered me his truck. I have this truck. The Lord has blessed me with the truck. Told me a number of times. He's blessed me with this truck. If you ever need the truck, let me know. And I've taken him up on that offer a few times. And the church has taken him up on that offer. And the pregnancy center has taken him up on that offer because he feels like that was from the hand of God and he's going to use it for the kingdom of God. He's also offered me storage space a number of times. And I kept thinking, I'm not sure, I don't have anything to store. And he offered it to me 2 or 3 times on 2 or 3 different occasions. And then someone else in the church came and said, I'm moving. I don't have money for a storage unit. Do you know anyone that has some storage space? And I said, I can't believe it, but I do. And I linked the two of them together. Even his space. He says, I've been given this space. If anyone needs it, it's there. That is taking whatever the Lord has given you, whether it's time, whether it's your gasoline, whether it's your vehicle, whether it's some empty space you have on some property you have, and saying, I'm going to use this for something good. To be wise with whatever it is you've been given. It is fulfilling to leave a legacy as well. That's something that lasts beyond your lifetime. Whether it's financial or whether it's, I know my dad's dad is up there in age, and he's been struggling on and off with his health. He didn't give an update here. He's back doing well again. But I know when he passes away, he's left me a great legacy of what a man is, of patience and of toughness and of consistency. And I'm so grateful for that. That is valuable. He took what he had and he used it to invest in the people around him. That's incredibly important and very fulfilling. Jesus tells the parable of the talents. To one much was given, and he went out and invested it and made more, and he was rewarded. To another was given a moderate amount, and he did all right with it, and he was rewarded. And to the third, a little bit was given. And remember, he buried it and didn't use it for anything. and he was scolded for that, right? Whatever the Lord has given you, be wise with it. Use it and invest it in the kingdom of God. Use it to help the people around you. All right, number 5, chapter 9, verse 9. Now this one is a great point, and then halfway through it, he takes a negative spin on it. I kind of smirk at it because the guy almost had just a great one, and then he took, let's read it together. Chapter 9, verse 9. Solomon says this, live joyfully with the wife whom you love. That's beautiful, right? But what's he say after that? Live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life, all the days of your empty life. He says, which God has given you under the sun, all the days of your vanity, for that is your portion in life, and in the labor for which you perform under the sun. And then we read the next verse earlier, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. But he says, live joyfully with your wife. And I would add family. Live joyfully with your wife and with your family, to have that loyalty, to have that love with your spouse, to choose to love them every single day. And if you've been in this church for a while, you've probably learned that love isn't necessarily an emotion, that love is a decision, and that it's a commitment that we make, and that a lot of times the emotions will follow in later. Or you'll have the emotion, and the emotion will come and go, but to love is to choose to love, and to say, I choose to love the wife whom I married however many years ago. I choose to love my family. To live a life in love with your family has great value. In this book of 12 chapters of emptiness and vanity, he puts that line in there, live joyfully with the wife, and I would add family, whom you love. I love spending time with my 3 kids, and I've been so blessed to have that kind of time to spend with them. And over the years, we do chit-chat nights. They're 3 girls, so chit-chat nights. I take one for the team on that one. And we put a sheet up over some chairs and make a little tent, and we lay on the floor, and we just chit-chat. They say, tell a story about when you were a kid, Dad. And then they'll tell stories, and we'll talk, and we'll giggle till 12 or 1 or 2 in the morning, and then that's chit-chat night. And those times are so valuable. And even yesterday, I got home after being out for 14 hours or something like that, and my youngest daughter, my 2-year-old, she says, horsey, Dad, horse, which means I'm the horse. That means that I get down on my hands and knees and she rides me around. And it's exhausting, but that's so rich, so valuable, and so fulfilling that we don't want to live such a fast-paced life that we miss those times. I take my wife on dates, and we take each of our kids on one-on-one dates because there are 3 of them all kind of mashed together in that same little kid age group. We want to make sure we have time for each one of them. All those moments, I want to soak those moments up. They're so rich. We make family DVDs every so often. And we were on a trip where we went to visit my grandparents, and they wanted to see it, so we put it in. And my brother Mark is 11 years younger than me. He's like, seriously? You're going to make me watch your family DVD? No one wants to watch a DVD of someone else's family, right? If we're all being honest, we don't want to watch slideshows of someone else's family get together. I mean, it's amusing for, 15 seconds, maybe 17. But we put it to music, So it's got like this warm music, and then there's like quick shots, slow motion shots, and big smiles and all this fun stuff. And he says, wow, that was really good, actually. And I think he was tearing up a little bit as well, because they are his nieces, But he said, you know what, I actually could watch this DVD. And then the next portion of it is 5.5 minutes of them brushing their teeth. Just standing there, I put the video on the mirror so you can see their faces, and they're brushing their teeth. I think Jasmine 7 times did the rinse. And then she's like 3 years old, so it kind of splitters down onto her shirt. And to me, it's awesome. It's amazing watching my 3 and 4-year-old brush their teeth. And he said, you know what, I thought you had a good one at the music part, but then the brushing teeth part kind of lost my interest. But all those moments, they're so simple. And you think, oh, it's just mundane. It's just brushing teeth. It's just building a little tent fort, But those moments are so fulfilling. He says, live joyfully with your wife. And I would add family. That has value. That has tremendous value if we can live in joy and live in love. All those simple moments with our families. Let's not miss those moments. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 7 says what about love? Love bears all things. Love believes all things. Love hopes all things. And love endures all things. Right? To live in love with your family, with your husband, with your wife. That adds an incredible amount of value. And then lastly, I told you can't stay for the first 5 and then leave for number 6. So anyone that's left between then and now is missing it. You can have the first 5. You can do them perfectly. But if you don't have number 6, it's going to wipe out all sense of value and fulfillment. Solomon, possibly the wisest man ever to live, he concludes the whole matter by saying this. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Chapter 12, verse 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. What's the matter? The matter of life, the matter of fulfillment. And he says this, fear God and keep his commands. This is man's all. That's it. It all comes down to that. To fear God and keep his commands. We must live with a fear and we must live with a reverence and an awe for God. If we don't have that fear and we don't have that reverence and that sense of awe in the presence of God, we're going to miss out on fulfillment in all of our lives. Every area of our life is going to feel empty. Why? Because he has placed eternity in our hearts. And he is the eternal, the everlasting one. And we must live with a sense of fear and a sense of reverence and a sense of awe. And that fear and that reverence should lead our actions. I know in promoting a Wednesday night prayer meeting, I mentioned that the week previous to that, my daughter stuck a plastic bead up her nose and it got stuck way up here. We had to take her to urgent care. And by the time we got done, we factored in, okay, we'll be able to get to prayer meeting for 10 or maybe 11 minutes. They'll already be done. And the thought is, well, let's just go home. It's only 10 minutes. And both of us, my wife and I, said, no, we fear God. We reverence God. We honor God. We want our children to see that we honor God. So we're going to get in the old Yukon, and we're going to head on over to church, and we're going to make it in time for the last 7 or 8 minutes of that prayer meeting. And we get in, and indeed, we did miss everything. Everyone was kind of starting to wrap up, and you guys were towards the last song. But the point is, we have to live a life that honors God, that reverences God, that shows that awe of who God is, to say, God, I want your honor. I want your favor upon my life. Therefore, I will order my life in order to respect and honor you first. And that fear should lead us to honor him. We also must obey God. We will never have peace, and we will never have fulfillment in our life outside of God's law. Why is that? I don't necessarily believe the primary reason for the law was to test you, to test God's people. I think the primary reason for the law being given to the nation of Israel way back in history was to lead them and guide them into a close relationship with God. So they wouldn't wander out and miss out on who God is. It's to lead us and guide us in the blessing and in the relationship with God, which is the ultimate fulfillment. The ultimate fulfillment and joy in life comes from being connected to God, your Creator. And fear and reverence, those are the things that lead us to deeper intimacy. If we don't have a fear or a reverence or an honor of God, we will never grow close in our relationship with God. We must first fear him and honor him and reverence him. And when we do those things, we begin to worship. And as we worship, we learn more of who God is. God reveals more and more of himself to those who fear him and to those who honor him. Do you see what I'm saying? That fear and that reverence leads us to a closer relationship with God. If we don't have that sense of honor that leads us to worship, that sense of fear that leads us to commitment to his house and to his word and to a life of prayer, we will never really grow in that walk with God that he desires us to have. So we see 6 things that really matter in life. To work hard and enjoy what you earn. That was number 1. And secondly, to live everything according to God's timing. We saw thirdly, to develop those good friendships and invest in good friendships. Then we saw it's important to use whatever you've been given for the glory of God. And then 5th, we saw family. To love your family, to love your wife, love your husband, and love your children. But those 5 won't add up to fulfillment if we don't learn to fear and reverence God. Because our fear and our reverence will ultimately lead us to worship and love God. But the fear and the reverence oftentimes come first. If we could all stand to our feet, let's just spend time worshiping the Lord. Let's kind of reflect on the things that we've heard, whatever's been stirring on your heart. If you'd like to come up to the altar is open. But if you're here this morning and you've been struggling with finding fulfillment in life, I would challenge you to read this book again, to look through all these scriptures again and say, Lord, where can I add fulfillment to my life? It starts with loving God.